Hello, welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to take you through a BizTalk Migration 101. What we're going to cover in this webinar, we're going to do a whole overview of the problems faced with BizTalk's Azure Migration. We're going to cover the need for migration, why it is that you should do it. We're going to look at target technology, and we're going to look at costs. We're going to look at running costs for your target platform, but also how you arrive at cost for migration. And we're also going to look at the migration process itself and how you get started. Who's this aimed at? It's aimed at technology decision makers. So if you're a CTO, an IT director, IT manager, enterprise architect, chief architect, this is for you because this is essential information that you need to get some of that legacy technology migrated onto a modern cloud platform. Okay, well, many of you know me from previous webinars with 345. I'm Andrew, and I'm very often the voice of 345 technology, but I have with me today brains of 345 technology. So I'll introduce on my left, James Hockey, and on my far left, Paul Brown, my two other co-founders, and between the three of us, we own and run 345 technology. So Paul, tell us a very quick bit about your experience of BizTalk and Azure.
Well, that actually goes back quite far. So I'm
bored already.
Yeah. So I literally started on BizTalk Server 2000 beta back in 2000. So I've literally been on the BizTalk journey since the very beginning. And again with Azure, I attended PDC 08, which is when it was.
We all did.
We all did actually. So which is when it was announced.
16 years ago.
So remind me. So it's quite a long time. But yeah, that's pretty much my experience. Obviously with integration as well. That's all the way through that.
And James, like yourself.
So not as far back as Paul, but 2002, I think, came across BizTalk originally. Then started working on BizTalk 2004. Worked on the beta. We had the product team, the company I was working for at the time, came in, worked through all the way through to with the current versions. Then Azure, yeah, like you said, PDC 2008. Working with it on and off ever since.
Yeah, and I'm a relatively newbie because I've only been doing BizTalk since 2004, 20 years. So, I'm still in short trousers compared to these guys. But it's not just us. We've actually got the strongest team of combined BizTalk and Azure integration engineers in the UK working in our company in 345 Technology. So we have a really strong team of architects and lead engineers around it. So the need for migration. So first of all, BizTalk's been around for a long time. Every application Microsoft put out has, an end of mainstream support and an end of extended support. So if you're on an earlier version of BizTalk, the latest version of 2020, that goes out of mainstream support in 2028, end of extended support in 2030. If you're on some of the earlier versions, you're probably already out of mainstream support, and you may even be out of extended support. Again, we can give you those dates. We've got those all. So if you want to get in touch with me and know whether you're in service life or not, get in touch. But what might some of the other, what are the critical things that people are going to be looking at in terms of why they might need to migrate?
So you just talked about support. I guess it depends on your attitude to risk as to whether you carry on and use BizTalk beyond the extended support date. But for regulated industries, that's not an option. Yeah. So they normally have to have vendor support. And if you go, basically you can't go beyond that extended date. So that becomes quite a critical factor.
But even if you want Cyber Essentials, you've got to have vendor support, haven't you?
Yeah, true.
If you want ISO 27001, you've got to have vendor support.
Absolutely.
So it's not, it's not that optional for a lot of people, because if you need to maintain those kind of those certifications, there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So the end of service life dates are quite key, and those aren't going to move. There isn't going to be another version of BizTalk. So when BizTalk 2020 is out of service life, which is going to come around faster than you think, that's it. What might some of the other compelling events be that might mean that people need to take action?
Generally, something that's quite a significant project or program within an organization might be you've got a hardware refresh cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Generally happens every few years. Hardware doesn't naturally refresh itself, so you end up
even your hardware is only going to have warranty for a certain amount of time, isn't it?
Exactly, and you might be on some sort of finance plan which you're paying off over a number of years, but ultimately at the end of that you might be looking at capital expenditure for a whole new set of hardware. You've got rather large environments that ends up becoming quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Other things like data center migrations, moving away from more traditional data centers, maybe into the cloud, and a lot of business application is something in terms of a significant line of business application like an ERP.
Yeah, because for a lot of customers, the ERP is like the core of their business, isn't it? And if that is moving, because again, a lot of customers we find are moving their old on-premises systems into SaaS products, and then you've basically got to reintegrate the whole lot. So why would you reintegrate it on old stuff?
Well, at those points, you would make it's a natural time to make the decisions about, do I actually need to relook at my technology stack and what I run on, and integration being quite a key part of many businesses, certainly large businesses. That's the opportune time to completely relook at all.
Another thing we find though is, ultimately, we all know about sort of the old COBOL systems and the fact that there's a few kind of old guys that know those and support them.
Well, I remember COBOL, so from my IBM mainframe kicks days.
Well, that's why I wasn't too moved about them. But the skills for those systems are really scarce and really expensive, and it's becoming that way for BizTalk. That actually, if you need to actually do serious development on BizTalk, it's actually really hard to find the skills for that. I mean, we've got some of those skills, and there's the odd person here and there, but as a whole, it's people have moved on and they're doing other things. So getting that availability of skills is really, really hard. So it's not just is your platform maintained from a product perspective, but it's also can you maintain your applications and can you get hold of the skills for that? And the answer for that is increasingly no, you can't. So if we move on now to sort of look at target technology, I mean, okay, we're a Microsoft partner, and so we naturally look at the target technology being Azure. But instead of just taking that as a given, because some customers treat this as an opportunity to say, well, do I want to go MuleSoft? Do I want to go SnapLogic? Whatever. Why is it that for BizTalk migration, Azure becomes a compelling choice?
So reuse. So you can actually, and so nowadays you actually get quite a lot of reuse out of the BizTalk artifacts that you've created. So you can completely reuse your schemas, your maps, even complex maps with custom functoids.
Yep.
And we know how much effort goes into building those, building and testing those. Fairly new developments, such as the rules engine. Microsoft, porting the BizTalk rules engine, so you can use your policies and vocabularies out of the box. Funny with the rules engine is that, although the rules engine is very much a sort of routine forward chaining engine, people use it very commonly as a configuration store, as a way of providing configuration to BizTalk applications. So that is actually one of the ways Microsoft have been closing the gap and enabling more reuse.
But also, even if you've got orchestrations that call directly out to C# code, you can include those C# assemblies now and reuse those directly as well. So
absolutely,
it's that level of reuse isn't available on any other platform.
It isn't, and also then you take that a little bit further and you look at that if you're already in that Microsoft ecosystem from a development perspective, then it become your skills become transferable because the environment in which you develop in Azure is familiar.
Visual Studio.
Visual Studio. Okay, there's a
Azure
lot of
DevOps.
use of Visual Studio Code, but it's again very familiar. So there's a lot of skills transference. In terms of the way that you build BizTalk applications, when you build BizTalk applications, very much based on patterns. Patterns are the same. The enterprise integration patterns, they're the same whether you're on BizTalk or whether you're in Azure. And Microsoft have actually got quite a lot of good collateral on their website around architectural guidance, around taking very common patterns and how do you do them on the Azure Integration Services technologies. So there's a lot of really good information out there about how to migrate BizTalk applications to Azure. There's other things as well that Microsoft have got in preview, which is again closing the gap. So things like integration environments, being able to almost put rings around various different various different artifacts that make up your application.
In the way that BizTalk applications grouped assets together, that when that goes into Azure, there's the ability then to group those assets together.
It's like a logical
as a
grouping,
unit, a logical grouping for managing that.
Exactly.
That
So
application.
that makes sense of your integration applications a lot easier to. Because generally speaking, if you look at a resource group in the Azure portal, it's just a big whack of resources, but integration environment is going to make that a lot easier to reason about your different applications. And then you've got business process tracking. So, and I mean that's pretty cool because the business activity monitoring in BizTalk, there wasn't really an equivalent that existed in Azure, and that's coming.
Because that's something that it's not porting directly from BizTalk stack, but it's an equivalent.
It's an equivalent.
But it actually leverages the whole cloud platform to achieve that. So you're not just piling stuff into SQL Server. It's actually leveraging the much more scalable cloud.
And fairly easy to use. So you create a business process, much like you would create an orchestration, but you create a business process and then you hook in to logic actions as to where you want to grab data.
Yeah, and you can do that afterwards
that you want
as well.
to track. And you can do that afterwards. You don't have to do that as part of the development.
It's not baked in with the code.
No, exactly.
And business activity tracking is really important for when you want to manage your business. It's like, has my order shipped? Or, where is this customer process? Where is this? I'm onboarding a new starter. What's happened? The ability to be able to go back through that process and do that is really important. So that's a great feature. Let's just talk about, we're talking about technology decision makers. What about the financial decision makers though? So, if you've actually got to go to a cloud platform, then what is it financially that makes Azure more compelling?
You only pay for what you use, generally speaking, unless if you're looking at multi-year and you're going down, things like reserved instances and so on. That's a really good cost optimization technique. But generally speaking, you're only using what you use.
Yeah.
So if you deploy and then tear down, it's only that time that it was deployed and running that you get that you're being charged.
And you actually get charged by the second for that. So most other integration platforms charge you per node or per CPU, and you have to pay that for a year. And then you're locked in to pay that full lot for the whole year.
Traditional licensing model.
And in a traditional licensing model, and that can be really expensive. But even like for like, I mean, if we compare, like particularly one of the a very common platform, MuleSoft, it can be 5 times more expensive than running on Azure. I mean, it's the cost differentials are really, really big. And even then, that's just running your stuff on Azure. But then, like you say, you've got the opportunity to flex up and down on Azure, so you can make that even less.
And also the idea of just-in-time infrastructure, where you typically if you're working on a new project where and you're adopting Azure, you don't have the environments available yet, and so that's part of the program is you're building those environments. So you don't necessarily have to go right from day one. I need to have a production infrastructure. you can develop it and then tear it down and then wait until you're ready to be able to start to then deploy into your structure. So you only need resources in Azure when you actually need them.
And similarly,
and then, therefore you're not being charged as a result.
And similarly, if you're only using, for example, if you're using Logic Apps to start with, but you're not using API management, and that's going to come later, then you just put your API management in. It doesn't have to be the whole environment. You can just have parts of the environment. So Absolutely. It's just that just-in-time infrastructure. So consumption-based, much cheaper running costs, and then only paying for what you use, really, really important. It's also about just the overall, evergreening and how that platform is maintained, because unlike, a lot of people still think of integration platforms as a product. It's got a version number, and then you patch that and that sort of thing. But Azure is also platform as a service, or integration platform as a service. So it's got a completely different paradigm for how that gets updated. So what are your thoughts on that? Chip in, James, if you want.
Well, no worries. I think organisations can find this quite challenging if they're very used to running systems on premise.
Yeah.
Yes, you do your security patching.
I've put this thing in, but I've got it for 5 years, and I don't change it.
Yeah, largely you don't change it. The cloud, all clouds, it's not just Microsoft, but they constantly move forward, and you've got to. That's a good thing because it does stay evergreen. But as an organisation, you've got to expect that and move with it. So you continually having to keep on top of.
So you will get advanced warning of deprecation.
You do get advanced warning, and the Microsoft are really good. It tends to be, quite a lot of warning in advance. They don't pull the rug out from under you, straight away. You get time to plan and migrate, but it does move forward all the time. So that's something that you need.
And it's not hidden either, is it? It's there, bank center in the portal.
Exactly.
The warnings are there,
exactly,
even for your admins.
But I think there's a runbook you can run now, which gives you all the resources, the types of resources that you use, and it gives you advisories on what changes are coming up to those resources.
And typically, typically the way they do it is the first thing that happens is you can't create resources that are deprecated, but you usually get 6 to 9 months warning for that. And then usually it's a couple of years after that they actually get withdrawn. So even though you get notice, when you get plenty of notice, it's not like got to do this next week. So you do have to stay on top of it. It has to be part of your annual, annual sort of process to go and look at these things. What's deprecated? What am I going to do about it? It doesn't have to. You don't have to react to it month by month, but you definitely have to keep on top of it by year.
Well, look at the advisory we had recently around NSG flow logs.
Yeah.
So they're being deprecated, but you can still create them up until the middle of next year.
Yeah.
And then you've got 3 years then to migrate away from NSG flow logs and move to VNet flow logs. Yeah. So, that's an example of there's plenty of time, but it's going to happen. So you've got to plan and work with that.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot of reasons why Azure's technology is quite compelling for BizTalk. Now, one of the things I'm always asked is what are the running costs? And you go to almost any Microsoft partner and you say, well, how much is it going to cost me to run my integration platform in Azure? And they'll kind of suck in some air and say, depends. And the reason for that is that the way that most people build cloud platforms is they say, well, give me the project, I'll design it, we'll implement it, we'll deploy it into Azure, and then we'll tell you how much it costs. And obviously for customers, that's not really an acceptable answer, because it's like, well, don't you have any idea? So one of the things that we've done, we've taken a different approach in that, people are migrating off BizTalk. Well, let's create a platform in Azure that's the footprint, that's the integration landing zone that can run those BizTalk equivalent workloads. We call that 345 Air, but it's an opinionated implementation that gives you everything you need. And what that enables us to do is produce a bill of materials for Azure, and then we can cost that. And okay, what the typical cost depends on how many test environments you've got and what your scale is. But a typical production environment for us, it's sort of maybe 21k at the lower end, 45k at the top end. That's in terms of UK pounds. But a lot of that's driven by API management. So if you don't need API management, those costs can be a lot lower. But we generally these days are recommending API management because it makes it a lot easier for you to interface with SaaS applications and for third parties to securely send information to your business. But talk to me about that if you're unsure. But if you're sort of looking at 21 to 45 as a kind of ballpark, and it depends on whether you need the private network and that sort of thing. But those are typical costs. But that is consumption only, so you're only paying for what you use. If you only needed to run workloads 1 day a month, you could tear it all down, spin it up 1 day a month, run your workloads, tear it down. So there's all sorts of things we can do to optimize the cost. Like Paul said, there's reserved instances. We've got various tools to do cost optimization. So talk to me, but that gives you at least a ballpark. Whereas other integration platforms, you might easily be looking at a couple of $100,000 a year. So it is very competitive in terms of putting those workloads into Azure. Okay, I want to move on now a little bit to what the process looks like. Okay, if you're there, you've got your old BizTalk servers, and you want to migrate into Azure. It's like, well, James, what do you do? How do you go about going from where you are now to that day when all that workload's in Azure and when you're in the sunny uplands of cloud technology?
So one of the things we wouldn't have to go for a massive planning session and bring everything over one go, because you may find that it might take you 5 years. You've got such a massive BizTalk estate. Mm-hmm. So what we'd advocate is that you'd actually break that down into smaller chunks. The first thing you do is do an assessment.
Yeah.
So we'd come and help you. Typically 1 to 2 weeks time period elapsed. We'd come in, we'd work with you, workshop, understand what you've got. We've got some tooling which we can run over your BizTalk MSIs, understand your estate. We need to obviously talk to you, your business analysts, your product owners, and understand what usage is for that application. We then come back to you, and actually then present back to you our findings. And we give you. Sometimes people don't know what they have got and what they haven't got because it's evolved over time. It might go back to 2004. So
and that's quite
common,
quite, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
That people have the size but don't have.
It's quite common to say, we had some developers come in. They went years ago. We've got this thing. It just works, but we don't know anything about it. So so that's what we've dealt with, isn't it? That we go in, understand what the bill of materials is, and effectively, that assessment stage is really important because it gives you the information you need to plan. But what happens after that? Okay, we come in, do an assessment. We sort of say, here's all the BizTalk things you've got. Project to migrate it is going to be this big and it's going to take this long. And these are your risks. These are the things you can reuse. What happens next?
Well, ideally, we work with you and we actually say, okay, we've got this we've got this work process which is actually not very high value for you, so low risk. Why don't we take that one and use that as a POC and actually migrate that one as a first one? We'd understand that. We'd also work with you to put the infrastructure in, 365A.
Yeah.
Because that's a pre-packaged, it's a known environment. We know how to get it up and running. We can get you up and running in 2 to 4 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, because many customers find that when they first go into the cloud, they faff around with infrastructure, and it's really expensive because cloud infrastructure, to make it secure, make it scalable, to meet all your non-functional is really hard. So having an out-of-the-box infrastructure footprint you can put in is really valuable for you because it means you can deliver value quicker. But it also means that you've got a known cost for that as well. So you haven't just got to get people and just hope that they get it done in a certain amount of time. 2 to 4 weeks fixed price, done, got infrastructure platform, and then because you need the cloud infrastructure to be able to put your applications onto. So, and you mentioned that big bang isn't the way to go. So, how might you then go? What might it look like after that?
Then ideally we'd use the agile methodologies, which we all love, a 3-4-5. Wouldn't go waterfall, and we'd actually start then iteratively migrating your workload into Azure. Do some planning up front, understand what use cases we need to bring in, what order they are, the priority as well. So work with you, start bringing that slowly over. So as I said at the start, we wouldn't want to do 3-4 years worth of a project and big bang at a weekend. Say, right, we're going live. We bring stuff over slowly, so that your ops team understand how the new environment works and get them up to speed. Your business as well, that they're sort of on board and win them over as well, because obviously there's going to be change for them in operational process.
Well. Manages the risk.
Yeah, manages the risk.
But also it's because one of the issues a lot of customers have is literally test capacity. It's like if you're going to do a big bang approach, then you've got to test that whole thing all in one go. Whereas actually, if you can deliver that in small chunks, then you've only got to test it in small chunks. And once it's there, it's you can just leave it running.
And not to forget your development teams. Bringing them on as well on the journey. This is a relatively new stack, although it's familiar as Microsoft. There are new technologies to get to grips with, and so bringing on your development teams as well on that journey is really important. Really important to a lot of customers.
Yeah, a lot of customers find that they've got a development team. They might not have the Azure skills, but they want to use this process as an opportunity for their own team to develop those skills, and that's something that we can work with you on that to say, well, we'll put some of our really experienced engineers in, but your guys can be part of the team as well. And then they'll learn throughout that journey, and at the end of it, we can hand over all that solution to you, and then you're self-sufficient. You stand on your own feet. We're not going to hold that tightly and make you dependent on us. What we want is for you to actually be self-sufficient and stand on your own feet. So just recapping on that, then effectively there's 4 phases in this. There's the assessment, and that actually only takes, let's say, that takes a couple of weeks. Yeah. Then what we usually do is proof of concept or proof of value. We then put the infrastructure in, which is our 3-4-5 air standard footprint, and then we do the agile project to do the migration iteratively until you've delivered all the features. So the other question that people always want to ask is, how much does migration cost? Now, this one that really is well, it depends, because how many BizTalk applications have you got? How complex are even a BizTalk application isn't a standard thing. A BizTalk application can have 2 orchestrations, or it can have 200. So this is where the migration assessment is really important. And because we have tooling that goes over your BizTalk artifacts, it doesn't matter how big those applications are, because the tooling will just run on those. And so a migration assessment, it costs you less than £5. But what we do is we get that whole bill of materials of what BizTalk features you've got, and we can assess the complexity of those. And then we've got some stats to build up an estimate based on that list of features. And so if you want a rough order of magnitude figure for project costs, because if you're going to do a migration project, you probably need to have a plan, maybe build a business case, get that signed off by finance. That level of planning, you need to have at least a target number you're aiming for. So we can give you it'll be between this and this. And that's really what you need to move the project forward, because you've got to have that idea of ROM cost before you get started. Let's say the migration assessment costs less than £5,000, but depending on your status, we might be able to get funding for that because Microsoft are investing in this kind of initiative to help people move workloads into Azure. And so, and for things like the proof of concept, proof of value stage, there might also be funding available for that. So some steps of your journey may be fully or part funded by Microsoft. And for us as a solutions partner, we are eligible to apply for that funding on your behalf. So again, talk to us because that funding may be available. And so the key thing there is there's no real reason to not get started, because it's going to cost you a very, very small amount to get that information, and you may even be able to get some of those early stages funded. Okay, we're coming to the end of this now. So this was really just an overview of BizTalk migration. We can delve into much more detail in the future, but the key takeaways are really it's only a matter of time before you need to act. There will be a compelling event. It's just a matter of time. So be informed. Get the information. Find out what you've got to migrate, how much it's going to cost you, because you can plan now, even if you're going to act later. Azure is almost certainly the easiest migration path, and there is funding available to help through some of those early phases of the journey. So that's the key takeaways. If you'd like to sort of just summarize it, what for you is the key thing to say about the webinar? What's the key message you want people to take home?
Time is of the essence. So that those dates are going to come around. 2025 for mainstream support, 2028, sorry, mainstream support, 2030 for extended. That's going to come around quicker than you think. So I think time is of the essence, really.
Absolutely. James?
So I'd say put a plan in place now, because like Paul says, that the end date is there for BizTalk, unfortunately. And the sooner you can get a plan in place, maybe talk to us, let's get you the funding, we can help you on that journey to actually then migrate earlier than you actually needed rather than at the last minute.
Very selfishly, I'm going to have two things going on. The first one is, like James says, you've got a plan now, but you've got a plan based on data. So don't plan based on plucking numbers out of the air. We can give you data to plan. But the other thing is that there is going to be a rush for the exits, and the skills are going to be really short when it comes to 2030, when suddenly everyone is up against end of service life. So get things done sooner rather than later, because you might find it difficult if you. And that's it. So that is all, folks. Thank you very much for listening to our BizTalk 101 webinar, and we'll catch you soon.